And welcome to tonight's Monday night guest speaker. Glad you could make it here with us. Um, just a few announcements before we really get kicked off. But we do have some more guest speakers coming up in the next few weeks. We have Arissa Duval on December the 4th talking some about accessibility. I've actually seen that talk. It's really good. It's a really good talk, really important topic. And then we have Dr. Amy Shaw on emotional first aid, which is kind of dealing with job rejection. Pretty relevant, especially to me. Whenever I was job searching, I got rejected a lot, and sometimes you need a little emotional first aid. And so she's here to talk about that. That is on December 11th. So definitely tune into those. Then we'll have sort of a winter break and start back at the beginning of the year. Other than that, we are working on more events all the time. For instance, a demo day that'll be coming up in January. So make sure to stay tuned to the Slack channels and to our newsletters. That's where you get all that information the fastest and the best. But really, other than that, just a couple reminders. Make sure to keep yourself muted. If you want to ask a question, feel free to raise your hand and ask it. Joe Kratzat here has been very gracious in saying we can actually stop him if we would like a question or two. And also, as always, you can drop questions in the chat too. So with that, we have here Joe Kratzat, who is a hang on, how do I put this? Senior technical.
I got you. Senior. Okay. It's a totally made up title.
Yeah,
but senior member of technical staff is what they refer to it as.
Okay, right. He is that with Oracle, and he's here to talk a little bit about advancing your coding skills and your career and things. And so, I'll turn it over to Joe. Thanks a lot, Joe.
Yeah. Hey. So first off, you saw other people's presentations and they were really good. I hope I held the bar up there high. So my name is Joe Kratzat. I'm here in Lexington, Kentucky, and I have been playing on computers since like 5th grade. I've always wanted to be a person who plays on computers professionally. I didn't know what that meant growing up. Back in the day, which was like the 90s, to me, that was like being a professional video game player. That did not exist. So I thought, okay, what else could I do? I know I'll go learn computing. And so that's kind of the career trajectory I'm going to talk about tonight, is a little bit about how I got into computers, roughly my educational background, but more importantly, like my education through employment, and then just what I try to do now to like help grow the community and like help people like you all as well. And I also want that to somewhat translate into how this works for you all, right? Like that's the important bit here is like, I can go on and on about myself, but we don't want to hear that. We want to say, how does that help me grow my career? And so like, how do you all get into the tech industry? How do you, based on exploration and education, how do you get your job? And then more importantly, how do you keep it? And then one thing for me, again, I've kind of said community is building connections for you all. And so those are really important things that I have picked up over my years of being a software engineer. So just real quick background, like I said, really got into computing probably in high school, kind of skipped out half a day to do like vocational training, hardware, computing, things like that. And then luckily enough was able to get introduced to a program that got me my MCSE certification. That's the Microsoft, I don't even know what it stands for anymore, but it was the Microsoft certification to be an administrator, right? So I thought, I'll go into, being an administrator on computer networks and things like that. Went into college and got a traditional computer science degree, just a bachelor's. Was not an amazing student, enjoyed my classes, enjoyed computer science. But the more important bit around that was I did fine in my CS classes, fine. But I played around at night with stuff, right? So I picked up PHP books on Amazon.com, which was a new thing at the time. And so I started learning and kind of self-teaching along with the computer science. Then went on to my master's at IUPUI, but for human computer interaction instead, which is HCI, some people call it, instead of just straight hard computer science. And so from there, I then went on to get a bunch of entry-level positions as just a, for lack of a better term, coder. Started out of college, and cool, we can talk about all the you know, the places I've worked. That's not the fun part. What's fun to me is the projects I've worked on. And so two that kind of jump out to me is, as I was working my way up to my career, I got to work on two really interesting projects. One was called eCallDoc. It's something else now, DigiNotes maybe. But what it was a way for a patient to call to a doctor's office, and this is for on-call, so at night. So the patient would call, the call would get forwarded to the doctor in the middle of the night, wake them up. The important bit is that they would open the app, they would open an app while on the call. It would link that patient's data and medical records directly to the mobile iPhone app. And so they could see that the patient, you know, had a history of X, Y, and Z, or whatever medicines they're allergic to, and be able to respond to that medicine to that patient. The really cool bit there is my codes actually saved somebody's life. In the middle of the night, some doctor was going to prescribe a medication to the patient. Double checked the notes while on the phone, and did not prescribe it because it would have potentially killed that patient. So that's really cool, and a really exciting part of the project, right? I remember some of the other stuff I did on it, but I think that was the really exciting bit. And so one of the things I want to kind of talk here is, like, the exciting parts are what gets me out of bed and gets me into the computing, the computer science, the coding aspect of what you all are excited to do as well, right? So the other project I worked on was a super silly, and I will say this to anybody who asks, super silly project that I absolutely loved. It was a silly little rubber duck that was smart. It had some Bluetooth in it that could play some music. It could light up and do some other, you know, calculation-y kind of stuff. It had like a thermometer in it, but it was geared towards little babies. But the really cool bit is I got to learn and play with some new technology. Here we go. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear this, and I apologize, right? So I got to program just the straight up interaction with the duck. And so that's all I coded, right? As the coder, that's what I came up and I built. Silliest thing ever. But as the software engineer, as I kind of grew into my career, step one, get the project done. Step two is make it pretty and nice and all these kind of things. And we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But then we actually cleaned it up, a team of us, to make it a lot nicer. Again, I'm not sure if you can hear the sounds and all that, so I apologize. But we turned this silly little project into an actual application that obviously you can get on the App Store, but you could buy this duck at Target or I think in the Apple Store and all that kind of stuff. And so we took that little project and made it something fairly big. It's no more, unfortunately. But we were able to take that and shoot, it's going to play it again. I apologize. Okay, cool. So as the project evolved, one of the things that I decided to do on a whim, and again, the client didn't pay me for this, I just wanted to do this kind of for fun, was a way to have this silly little duck interact with Alexa. And so the idea was, no idea. I just was excited and interested to build this project. So again, I'm not sure if you can hear this, but I actually talked to Alexa through this little Raspberry Pi's Bluetooth speaker. It actually talks to the duck and does some interactions. Probably should have checked the audio. I apologize about that. So you can see the light kicks on. So through that, was able to build this silly little project that was able to, I was able to talk to the customer and say, hey, should we build this? Basically, they said no. I said, that's okay. It was a learning experience for me. I had never built anything like that. So I was very excited. Let me skip. It's going to play it again. Cool. So before we get to Oracle, let me back up here a little bit. So some of those things you just saw was just straight up me coding stuff, right? It was, hey, let's take the iPad up, make the light turn on and off. Awesome. That was me sitting down, just writing software. To the next step, which was Edwin the Duck's actually full interactive app. We actually had to sit down with customers. We had to design features. We had to discuss the features. And then we had to like meet with the sales and marketing team and all that kind of junk to figure out like, hey, what do we actually want to build? And so we spent a lot more time and energy than I would like as a software engineer, and probably as anybody else would like as a software engineer, to come up with requirements and to flesh out the ideas and to design them out as a team, right? So again, the next step was that I said, hey, let me build this silly little prototype of interacting with Alexa. I took that and I brought it back to the team, and they said, nah, we don't have the time, budget, or energy for this, so we're not going to deal with it, right? So that is kind of the progression through software engineering, from coding to software engineering, is just writing the code, right? Cool. That's what we all love, and that's what we all enjoy. But to grow and advance your career, you have to interact with teams. You have to deal with other people. You have to deal with customers, clients, business folk, whoever, right? You're always going to answer to somebody, and it's not just you in a room coding and hacking and making things as best as possible. So you've got to take those next few steps and interact with the wider team. So that leads me into Oracle. If nobody's familiar with Oracle, it is a massive multinational company. I think there's 150 to 170,000 employees. And in my small, like little division, it's like 10,000 people. So if you're not familiar, Oracle started out as databases back in the, I don't know, 80s. And it's slowly progressed up to doing other stuff. They bought a whole bunch of Sun Microsystems, and they own Java and MySQL, that kind of stuff. But now more recently, they've started their own cloud competitor to Amazon or Azure, Microsoft's Azure or Google Cloud. So I'm now on the Oracle side of the Oracle Cloud, and I've gone through 3 different teams. So I started out as somebody who wrote software for what they call the control plane of the compute bare metal. And what that means is basically a customer says, hey, I would like to launch a computer through an API call. You talk to our control plane, and then we would spin up a computer and then give you back the information to be able to talk to it, right? So that is it in a nutshell. I know this chart is crazy and big and all over, but we're not even, this is for the later team. So the next step was I worked on cluster API stuff, which is a open source Kubernetes implementation to work across multiple cloud providers. If you're not familiar with Kubernetes, that's okay. It's a very high level technical orchestration tool for working typically in cloud software. And now that's the current team I'm on, is doing Kubernetes software. So I went from a very small, working on that silly Edwin the Duck, which is like me and 3 other people, to now I've got, I'm on a team of about 15 people, working in tandem with multiple people to deploy different pieces of software, to manage and maintain different pieces of infrastructure through software, if anybody's familiar with Terraform. And we also write documentation for our new features before we build and implement them and release those out. So I'm working in a large team large-ish for a software team, right? A lot of times software teams like 4 or 5 people. But we're building this large enterprise scale software. And so we're working in these large teams. So being just the coder, just dumping out code, that's awesome. So kind of what what makes the software engineering different is you're working in large teams or working with multiple people over larger timelines on larger projects, right? So we're going to scale up all the stuff that we're working on. And what I mean by longer timelines, what I mean by longer timelines is multiple months instead of multiple days, right? Yeah, this is just me being, okay. This is just me giving a conference talk about some of the stuff I've done. Not really relevant here, but I still enjoy being a software developer and just a coder, right? So one of the things that I am passionate about is building dumb projects. This is a really dumb project. It is a Raspberry Pi that sits out in my chicken coop, and it takes pictures every 30 minutes or so to determine if there's an egg in the chicken coop. And so I had to write some AI models and things like that to figure out, hey, is there an egg in my chicken coop? This dumb project was a failure because 50% of the time it thought it was an egg. It was chicken poop. So my model was no better than flipping a coin. Why do I bring this dumb project up? Is because this is how you get from just a coder to a software engineer. Is you build software, you write software, you design software, you build these small, silly little projects, right? I like to build ones that I get really excited about. I think that's the really important bit here. If you're not excited about it, you're not going to continue on it. You're not going to do it. But if you're writing the software, you're learning the processes, you're working with others, because I had to actually go out to some communities and say, hey, how do I do this? I don't know how this works. And then I also had to make some trade-offs here, right? I had to say, I got to the point where I can't make this any better because I don't know what I'm doing. So let me go talk to some other people or scrap the project. So I ended up kind of scrapping the project, right? So there's this time trade-off that I had to figure out through some of these processes, right? So again, through kind of software coding, you're just writing the code. Through working with teams and becoming a software engineer, you're working with multiple people. You're working over multiple larger timelines and on multiple features. So we're growing and we're building our tool set through just building silly, dumb projects and learning as we go. So cool. One of the things that I absolutely love to do is work within the community. And this is just kind of a sales pitch for the Lexington community. But I get to meet interesting people this way. I get to talk tech, and I get to learn a whole bunch of different tech that's out there that I wouldn't normally learn. And I apologize, this Lex Talk thing is old. That's from an older one. The book club is awesome. You are correct. We meet at the Cornerstone down on UK's campus. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out. But this is a growth opportunity. And so the way that I like to tackle problems is the least amount of effort for the most amount of gain. And so things like book clubs or JavaScript or Ruby meetups or small conferences, they're going to give a huge amount of bang for your buck to meet different people who have different sort of skill sets and talents that you or I don't. I get to go ask people like, hey, how should I tackle this problem? Hey, how can I think about this problem differently? Or how can I learn to do multiple different, iterative steps as I kind of work through software? So I can't advocate enough around just people, connections, and community. And that's one of the reasons and how I got to be, how I got to get to where I am now, is just honestly through people. It's my first foray into computing, like I said, in high school, was to get that MCSE certificate. Randomly at a bookstore, I'm looking at computer books. Person next to me was the instructor of the course and said, "Hey, are you interested in computers?" And I was like, "I sure am." We got to talking about it, and that sent the trajectory off with very little effort on my part, right? Just talking to a stranger. I know we shouldn't talk to strangers, but they have the best candy, so I'll continue to talk to them. Cool. What does all this mean for you? Well, I can't predict the future. I apologize. But what I can say is, how can we get you from just coders to, influential software engineers? So the first thing that I got to say is, cool, like, what is technology? What is tech? And the question is, like, do you just want to code? And maybe you do. Like, maybe that's totally what you want to do. But there's a lot more that's out there, right? So you can write software. You can be a user support, or I think sometimes they call them like pre-sale engineers, or I forget the other term, like support architect or something. There's fancy terms, but you can work in multiple different ways. So you're not just writing the back-end software. You could be working with the customer who you have more technical knowledge than, and you can help them kind of get their thing down, right? You can be a technical writer if you want, right? Or once you get to a certain point, you can kind of surpass me and be a manager, and I'll have to answer to you, and that'd be awesome as well, right? But there's a whole lot of different things you can do with this tech background and with software as you learn software, right? One of the big ones right now, I'm sure people have heard, security. So as you get into software and coding, you know what? Security is massive. Do you have to write code for security? For sure. Do you have to hack on somebody's computer to figure out how it works? Yep, red team go, right? There's a whole lot of stuff you can do with this. And so it's not just about writing code. It's about doing more and broadening your scope and broadening, kind of outside of just a single lone engineer, right? So some of the skills that you're going to need to work with this, for sure, coding, no question. You got to kind of understand some of the intricacies of how this stuff works. Do you need to write a Turing machine, and do you need to outcode your neighbor? No, not necessarily, right? Like you could just be a logical thinker and think through some of this. One of my first jobs out of college, the team lead had a PhD in it's actually called 5-axis machine movement, or 5-axis machine movement. So up, down, left, right, forward, back. And amazing, brilliant person, had like a double PhD in this stuff, could not code to save his life. It was just the worst stuff I'd ever seen. He ended up hiring 3 engineers to like implement his vision and his design. So it was amazing to see, what happened. But these folks were just straight up coders, and he was the lead of it with his logic and his the other skills that he presented, right? So a couple of the other things that I would highly recommend to grow into somebody who is going to be a software engineer, and I cannot stress this enough, is communication and writing, right? Like these two things are critical for you to be able to take your idea and convey it to somebody else, right? Like if you write up this amazing class, or this amazing library, or this amazing feature, and say, hey, we really need this, nobody cares, right? Like if you cannot convince somebody that the idea is good, if you can't convey it to somebody else, then it's going to be very hard for them to pick up and adopt it and say, yeah, let's spend the time, money, and energy to build this, right? Because that's again kind of what we're doing is software, like most things in engineering, is trade-offs, right? So I've mentioned multiple times that some of the things to software engineering is people, time. That time is the critical one, right? There's only so many hours in a day, so many days in a year. And if you come to me and say, hey, I want to build feature X, and your colleague says feature Y is the one to go, and that presentation or that idea is communicated better, and we only have so many days in the month, typically that one's going to get the priority. The other one comes on the back burner. And I've been in software long enough to see when things come to the back burner, they typically don't get picked up, right? So cool, you want to code, but you need to convince people, one, they can code, so you need the coding skills. But two, why should you code? Why should you build this feature? Why should you spend the time to make sure that this gets out the door. So those are, again, as a software background person, it took me a long time to learn that the writing and communication are a very critical part, just as critical, if not maybe more than the coding. Cool. So education. Like I said, I've got a background in computer science. You all, I'm not sure your backgrounds. Could be anything. But what I will say is I love our industry right now because it does not require a computer science degree to get to any level at all. None. We have a ton of, I actually just met another one today. I know at least multiple people at Oracle that are higher levels than me without a computer science degree. They have just spent the time and energy learning and figuring out kind of how things need to work and how things work. And they just spent more time and energy on it than me. And that's amazing, right? That's what's so cool about our industry is you can actually work really hard and get really far. One of the things that I would highly recommend to do is build dumb stuff, right? Do silly things that you think are silly. It seems like it's probably a waste of time for me to have built that silly little egg hack box thing, you know, that little egg thing. But I learned an absolute ton about how to get to get the images out of the camera from the Raspberry Pi. I may never use that. I don't know. I learned a ton about some artificial intelligence. Again, I may never use that. I don't know. But I got to learn and I got to grow with grow my skill set around that, right? And I fully believe this is that building dumb stuff will lead to useful stuff. And I've bet my career on that, and I've not been let down yet. I can't stress enough to spend that time, energy, and effort. Like I said, in when I was going through computer science, I had a lot of friends who just went to class and then just went and did whatever they wanted. And that's cool. Like, I'll be totally frank. Yeah, I've got tons of ideas on dumb stuff. But no, I'll answer that in just a second. One of the things I will say is they would go home and kind of do whatever, and I would go home and typically do whatever. But every so often, I would spend some time, like I said, picking up a PHP book and learning how to build like a stupid shopping cart or something like that, right? Like nothing that I was super excited to show people about, but just something I would play around with. And I noticed slowly I outprogressed them, right? I outpaced them simply because I was spending a little bit of effort to make a lot of bit of gain later, right? And so I think I'll say this again, but I'll try to say it now, is that if you spend the time and energy now, it's going to pay off huge gains later. And I'm not talking spending 6 hours a day staring at your computer, hating life, 12 hours a day, whatever. I'm talking like consistent 30 minutes a day, you know, that kind of thing, right? If you do that over the long haul, you're going to knock it out of the park. So if you spend that amount of effort now, it's going to pay off later. So I'm trying to read all these as they're coming through. Cool. So how do you find a job? This is a really hard one. One of the things I can kind of go back to again is this community and just having community, right? Knowing people, having friends in the industry is a really good first step. You can totally cold call, right? You can totally go into any job. You can try to go find wherever you want to work, and that might work. It totally might work. I had to do it a couple of times. Absolutely hated it. I want to go talk to this doctor. I forget who it was because it was demoralizing, but yeah, I have to do it. But having those connections will help get your foot in the door. Because let's be honest, I've bombed so many interviews. You'll probably bomb so many interviews, and that's okay. Like those things happen, but having that connection, a lot of places will say, hey, yep, Joe bombed the interview, but this person over here is going to stand up for him and say, yeah, he was just having an off day. Let's bring him in. And that's happened. And I've wowed the people who like I bombed the interview in front of because I kind of know what I'm doing. And on that day, I did not, right? There's a joke in running that is, you know, you'll practice prep months and months and months, and on race day, your legs just might not show up, and that happens, right? So you'll have a terrible race, and same with the tech job, right? You might freeze up because of something, or you might have forgotten something. And so having those connections really, 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 really helps. So how do you kind of keep these jobs is, again, with those connections and having that team, working with the team, as you kind of grow your software career, you're going to grow that network, and you're going to then hopefully grow into your next job. And through those connections and those growth opportunities, you'll continue to grow your career from into a much higher level software engineer. One thing I will say is I don't know how to keep you at a job, but when I can, and I do like this last quote here on the right, is run towards an opportunity, not away from a problem. So when you get your first job or when you find your next job, you might hate it. Like, it might not be the best thing ever. It might not be the thing that you pine to, be a part of. But if that's the case, don't just leave with nothing, there ready to go. Like, you want to go to something that excites you, because you're going to run to another job that you're also going to hate. Like, there's always something to hate about a job, but there's so many things to love, right? So run to that opportunity is what I would suggest. So these are just, again, kind of my suggestions on building your career and your network. Is if you can find good people to work with, good people right now. I don't know who you work with or who you connect with, but if you can find people that you're working with and connecting with now, those might be your colleagues, they might be your mentor or mentee, and they might even be your boss later, right? And so having these connections now is going to totally help you grow into that software engineer that's going to help lead the next, I don't know, Cloud 3.0 or whatever they're going with. I don't know. And so this is a really, really great way to grow your career. So I've just got a few quotes that I absolutely love quotes. Anybody who knows me, quotes are a really nice way to distill my jumble of a brain into different ways of thinking about things in a very succinct manner. So I think I've harped on this, and I can't harp on this one enough, is making useless things leads to useful ones. So build those silly projects that you're not sure that would ever see the light of the day. Don't share them with anybody. I don't care, but like, make them. Spend the time and the energy now writing the code, documenting it, thinking through the problems, and then throwing it away, right? It's going to help you grow into a really good coder and a really good software engineer, because the other thing that they don't tell you probably is that I've broken production, I've broken more computers, and I've probably created more bugs than anybody on this call. That's how I got to be senior, right? By failing. You're going to fail. You're going to figure out, oops, how not to fail again, and then move forward. So the only other, I didn't realize I was leading into that. The only way to live without failure is to be of no use to anyone. So you're going to fail a lot, and that is totally okay, right? You're going to break stuff. You're going to take a website down. You're going to accidentally blow up a database. These things happen. These are things that, as a software engineer, not coder, as a software engineer, you'll realize, oh, shoot, yeah, I'm totally going to break this. Let me figure out how to not break it first, so when I go to deploy my code, it will unbreak. So one of the first things during my interview at Oracle, they said, what's something you're really excited about at your last job? And I thought, and I said, oh, I wrote up this really good document on how to rebuild the server in case I broke it in the middle of the night. And guess what happened? I broke it in the middle of the night. I read through that document, and within 15 minutes, I had the entire thing built back up and everything ready to go. This was before a lot of the automation stuff. And I was really excited about this, because I was like, yeah, I know I shoot myself in the foot all the time. And the immediate response was, oh yeah, those are called run books. And I was like, Never heard that term before in my life. I knew I did that enough that it wasn't a problem for us. But yeah, a lot of people do the same thing, right? Like we all break things, so we need to unbreak them. So I kind of mentioned this just a little bit earlier, is that the hard work is sum of daily efforts. So when I say, hey, go work on dumb projects, again, I'm not saying do this 6 to 12 hours a day. I'm saying, I don't know, spend a half hour while you're watching Netflix, or, do something silly and just go, you know what, I'm not feeling it today. And that's okay. But spend that little bit of effort. Because over 6 months, over a year, over 10 years, you're going to have an absolute ton of hard work under your belt. And that's a really, really useful thing to do, right? They always say the days are long and the years are short. So if you can get a habit going like that, it's going to really accelerate your career. It is a great way to build good habits. Yes, yes, yes. So one of the things that I think maybe you all are learning now, or feeling like you don't know, is that, oh no, this software stuff is really hard. I don't know what I'm doing. I'll tell you right now, I've been doing this a long time. I still don't know what I'm doing half the time. So a lot of what we do is like, we do stuff without knowing, right? And so we're going to put our best foot forward, and we're going to, this is again where communication and documentation comes in really, really critically important in software engineering. Is I have to lay out what I think is going to happen. I have to lay out the feature. I have to say, hey, this is my plan. This is what I plan to accomplish. Here's the things I think could go wrong. And then I give it to other people to review. Holy cow, is that scary? Because they're going to find a whole lot of stuff that I didn't think about that could go wrong. And they're right. I missed this. I missed that. Oops, I covered that one. That's awesome, right? So I don't know how to move forward, but I was able to document. I was able to articulate my thoughts, hand it to the team, and then they say, oh yeah, that's great, but here's a few other things we can do, right? And as a team of software engineers, we grew the feature and delivered it, right? So the last couple are just like fun for me, but I like to be the verb, not the noun. So if you all want to be software engineers, if you want to be coders, if you want to be that kind of thing, do it, right? Don't just say it. Spend that 30 minutes a day, code, right? That's an easy one. Comparison is the thief of joy. Don't compare yourself to me. Don't compare yourself to the person next to you or the person behind you. Like, just compare yourself to you today. Do you feel your code's a little bit better? Do you feel your documentation's a little bit better? Like, if you're doing that, then you are accelerating, or you are you're accelerating forward. And that's a really great way to do this, right? If I compared myself to everybody I've ever worked with, oh my gosh, that would be the worst. Because I'm mid-range and it's been okay, but like, I'm not the best one ever, and nobody ever will be. So if you're comparing yourself to others, this will be a disappointing career. So just enjoy what you do and like compare yourself to yourself from yesterday. And then lastly, this is a personal me one. Some is more than none. So if you're working on a dumb project, just do some, right? It's better than zero. If you take it and scrap it tomorrow, cool. Pick up something new, work on something else, do something, but just make sure it's a little bit of something, not nothing, because you're not going to accelerate with nothing. So those are just some quick advice through through my silly little quotes that I absolutely love. But what I can say is, cool, right now we're starting out as coders. We're starting out as people who are interested in writing software, and that's awesome. So where do you see yourself? Where do you want to get to later in your career? What I can say is, through some of the stuff we talked about tonight, you can become that software engineer, right? As long as you're kind of taking people into account, you're taking time into account, and then you're taking effort and priorities into account. And those are kind of the three differentiators between the software engineer and the coder. When you're working with multiple people, you make sure you can communicate, you make sure you can articulate your ideas and your thoughts, right? You got to sell it. I hate sales, but like, that's what you got to do. You got to prioritize. You got to think about how certain things need to happen. But to get to that good software engineering level, you've got to code, right? You've got to code, you've got to build these things. You've got to spend your time and effort writing the silly projects or building the things that excite you, and then throwing them away because, maybe somebody does or doesn't want them, but that's how you're going to advance your career. So with all that said, I hope that was helpful. I would love to have a dialogue, open up questions, talk about anything. How do I do the hand raising thing? I'm going to let somebody else do that one.
I was going to say, you can just call on their name after they raise it.
Okay. Bernard, yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure I'm not muted. Yeah, man, I really appreciated your time. Said a lot of good stuff. Yeah, I'm just getting started. Is there anything you kind of touched on it, but I don't know more specifically, like, just how do you get started in this field? And I'm willing, trying to start small. I'm not trying to just jump in full time. I like what I do now, but I do want to get into this on the side and just build experience. And love what you said about 30 minutes, an hour a day, just getting better, learning. I don't have a tech background. I'm a teacher. I teach chemistry, but math and science is just, I enjoy those things a lot. So all that said, I guess just what can I do?
Yeah.
Is it just Googling? Like, I look up a lot of stuff like part-time jobs, entry-level jobs, and just see what the qualifications are and trying to learn those things. But I don't know. I feel like I like asking this question to everybody.
No, that's a great question. So my typical answer is find a problem to solve, right? I don't care what language you use. I don't care what technology you use. I don't care. The approach that you probably should take to any of this is, what problem is it that you're interested in that software can solve, right? So you do chemistry. Like, could you, using Python, I don't know enough about chemistry because I bomb the heck out of that. But could you do something to do some chemical equation stuff in Python, right? Yep, totally. There are libraries. Awesome. That's great. But like, could you write some stuff that does chemistry help with you, or heck, keep ranks of students, right? And to say like, hey, I haven't called on little Jimmy in a while. I'm going to have a little thing on my app that rotates the people I call. And again, like, these are all things that have been built. You're not solving new problems. You're solving problems yourself.
So, okay. Yeah, like everything you just listed, I was like, that's been created. So you're just saying, I do it so that I'm building that understanding, that creativity.
And it's a problem that is of interest to you, right? That to me is the biggest one. Is if I'm not interested in the problem, I'm not going to do it. I'll be straight up honest with you. I'm not going to do it. But if it's a problem I'm interested in, yes, I know it has been built a billion different ways. I get that. Build it again. Throw it away, build it again. One of the things that we typically do in software engineering is for hard problems, we do what's called a POC, or a proof of concept. Like, hey, can I actually build this with what I have? And so you'll spend a little bit of time to see, like, is it worth investing a huge amount of time, right? We're not to that area in our career yet. That's okay. Spend that time, 30 minutes a day, an hour a day, whatever it is. Heck, an hour every 3 days. That's fine. But like, spend a little bit of time to build that silly thing that you throw away and go, cool. I now learn how to install Python project libraries, or, I feel better about using Node.js, or whatever it is that you decide to use to build your tool. You'll learn a little bit. Boom, you'll do another project. Whoa, that was so much easier because I learned a lot more. And then so on and so forth. And by your nth number of projects, it's a lot easier.
Cool. Appreciate it.
Yep. Oh, I just saw this one come up. Okay, I see there's a whole bunch, and I'm sorry, I'm totally starting at the bottom. What's the minimum amount of projects you should have in your portfolio before applying for a beginner position? I don't know. I don't know that there's an exact number. What I have told people before is a couple is probably what you need, but more importantly, you need like one that you can talk about, right? Like one that you're excited to talk about, that you can tell the person interviewing you detailed information about. I've interviewed people that said, wow, I worked on this really cool thing that did a billion different things. Cool. What'd you do? Well, I worked on the team. Right? I got you. What did you actually do? I wrote code. Okay. I don't care. But then I talked to somebody else who built the silliest thing you've ever heard of, but that could answer every single question, could talk intimately about the implementation and all the stuff that went along with it. And that was more compelling than the person on the massive project that like I probably could never have worked on, right? Yep. So 3 to 5 projects is probably good, but like make sure you have one that you can intimately talk about and that you're excited about. When would I consider a project failed or finished? That is a hard one. I think it depends on your criteria, right? My definition of failure is to not pick it up and do it again, right? Or not learn from it. So when I said my stupid little chicken coop project failed, what I mean was, yeah, I just couldn't detect eggs. I don't care. Like that wasn't my goal. My goal was, can I write a little AI tool? Yeah, I did. So it was a total success, right? It just depends on your criteria of what you're trying to accomplish. And that's what I mean by the trade-offs in software engineering, right? Like I could have spent 6 years building this thing and then tried to sell it and whatever. Nobody cares. It's not a thing, right? And I knew that, right? So I made the trade-off of like, let me just make sure that I can do something and then I'll scrap it because I hit my goal. Yeah. When you're overwhelmed with new information, what do you do? Walk. Like no joke, walk. Mental, what do they call those? Mind maps. If you're not familiar with mind maps, I didn't really like them until somebody kind of showed me how to do it. But it's a really nice way to structurally to break down unstructured information into a somewhat structured document, right? So you could just write a bunch of stuff down, which is great, but the mind map allows you to like expand out and just be very unstructured. So that's one way that I typically approach like an unknown area and then like solidify it down into something that I could later document in, paragraphs and words and all that kind of stuff. Networking is a cheat code. If you meet someone, yep. People like to help people out. It's a really great way. It's a really great way to grow your career and see what's possible, right? Like that, I can't stress that one enough. Like if you don't know what's out there, how do you know kind of what to go for? And by meeting people who are in different areas, different fields, you just don't know what's there, right? So, yes, Ian.
I have a couple quick little questions. Hope it's not a big deal if I ask a few at once. But so when you're referring to like knowing one project really well, let's say I build a project based on a video game I like, when someone's talking about it, when you say like in detail, would that be like, oh, well, I built it with this language and I use these methodologies and I use this API? Okay. So
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So basically an interviewer is looking for a door, like an open door to come have a conversation. Like there are bad interviews. I've been there. They stink. They just want to grill you. Like, tell me this, tell me that. And it's like, oh, whoa, if you just want me to Google stuff, like I could do that. But like, if you'd rather have a conversation, but there are some really good interviews to where, yes, they're genuinely like, hey, do you know your stuff? And then how do we abstract that information out of you? It's by having the conversation around some project you've worked on. It's not pie in the sky. Here's a white paper, like fill in the Scantron bubbles and like, we know if you're smart or not, right? Like that typically not how they interview. So having that information to answer in detail exactly what you said.
Okay. And then the other two questions that I had were just so I'm about to finish my associates, and although I don't need a degree, it's like my own personal little pride thing. I want to go get a bachelor's degree. So I'm kind of, at the end of the day, I want to be a software engineer. That's my end goal. But like a lot of people are, they say computer science is like the go-to, and then others is like, okay, well, it depends on the university. It's like all this back and forth stuff. I mean, so from your perspective, from hiring perspective, does it really matter kind of what degree you have, as long as you have a base understanding and like the technical skills, as well as obviously all the other points that you talked about, communication, teamwork,
Yeah, it's it's one of those things that it's a box to check, is the way I describe my computer science degree, right? I checked the box, I got it, cool. Really, I don't know that anybody checks my resume anymore for my computer science degree, because I've got enough of the jobs, right? So kind of once you get past that, nobody seems to really care.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get it? Like, yeah, if you want to get it, totally. I'm not going to say anybody shouldn't do anything they don't want to do, right? Like, now, if I'm going for a job and my career has a bunch of years of my experience versus somebody who came out rocking out of MIT, I don't know. Are they going to kick me out? They might pass me by. That's totally okay, right? So I can't really say one way or the other exactly how to kind of answer that question. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of like, do you have other things as well, right? Are you personable? Are you articulate? Can you code? Like that's an important one. But during an interview process, little helpful hint, you should think out loud, right? Because the interviewer has no idea what you're thinking. So if they're giving you a whiteboard problem, if they're giving you an actual coding problem, like I will straight up go, I've got no idea. Let me think this through. So what I would probably do, this is just first step, I would do this. Does that seem right? Well, maybe. Let me think about this more, right? And so I talk it out loud. It's really weird. I would highly recommend practicing it. But having that is something that interviewers want to see, because the whole point of the interview is to see, can you do it? How do you do it? And then like, can I work with this person?
Yeah, it'd be a really boring interview if you were just silent the whole time working through a problem.
I've seen people do that and they rock it. I mean, they actually absolutely nail the interview, but like, I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking. Were they just looking on their computer and already had notes? I got no idea, right?
And I guess my last point was just, so networking, kind of, how do you get started? Like I have no idea like how to meet people. You go on Discords, do you find people, like online discussion boards? How do you go about it?
Yes. I mean, there's right. There's that's another hard one, right? You can totally do that. You can be Discord. You can be a part of an open source team or community or something like that, right? Like this is a really good way to do this, right? Like it's not something that's going to, I'm going to give you a silver bullet answer and then you're going to go out and find a million people that will, 10 people give you a job tomorrow. It's building those connections. It's talking to those people. It's genuinely being interested in them and finding out like, hey, how can I like get better at this? And they'll go, oh, you should go talk to Bobby over here. Bobby really knows what's going on, right? And then Bobby's going to like send you over to so-and-so, and you're just going to have this weird windy path of success through the community connections. So community means different things to different people. So having a local community, a wider community, I don't know kind of where what you're looking for and where you want to go, because the remote work scene has kind of changed things. But yeah, for sure, Discord, for sure, local, for sure, in some of the open source communities, right? Like that's another really good way to do it. Or going to conferences, you get to meet people. I know Louisville's got some good stuff. I know Cincinnati's got some good stuff, and Lexington's got some good stuff. So you've got a good little area like a little triangle there of tech that you can kind of get introduced to.
Okay, thank you so much.
One question I think you missed earlier was Kyle Costa asked, how likely are you to get a remote job?
Oof. I don't know. Likelihood is hard, but what I will say is I've done remote since about 2010. I think again, people get burned in remote, right? So typically employers get burned because they hire me to be a remote worker and I just disappear. Like they don't know what I'm doing, right? So they really have to build up trust. And so one of the things that you kind of have to do is just be a trustworthy individual, which I assume we all are. But just be somebody who can be dependent on and that kind of thing. And in some cases, even if you have a local job, you can still work remote, right? And so once you start having those remote jobs, I think the net gets a little bit wider. The scope gets a little bit wider once you kind of get that first remote job, because then people kind of go, oh, okay, you've been working remote for this long. Oh, okay, cool. Like you've not been fired. Oh, awesome. Like we can have this conversation, right? But getting that first remote job, oh, it's so hard. At least it was for me. Now it may be even easier because I know Oracle is hiring just straight up remote a lot. But I also know like Amazon's pulling everybody in, right? So they're trying to bring a lot of people back into to HQ or the hubs. So what I can say is try to land one job and then you can figure out the rest of the remote path, because you'll have kind of some remote jobs under your portfolio, as it were. Let's see, my job in Louisville's that way. Yeah. Yep. So hybrid is a really good way to get into that as well. Exactly. And then I think we've just got a few minutes left. And Kyle, you got a question?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the reason I just asked that was because like a lot of people my age, it's becoming more and more apparent that everybody is doing their best to move to remote work, because everybody is done with, driving to work every day, and just working in that environment remote is just worlds better. The reason I asked that was just I enjoy coding and I'm doing my best to move to a remote job. It's just something I have to do. So I just want to make sure I'm not, wasting my time, because I have no idea what the job market looks like. I haven't been in this field before.
Yeah. It's the remote jobs are opening up wider than they have been before, right? So it's I don't think they're going away, but I do think they're going to shrink a little bit, given that everybody's getting kind of the return to office. But they're not going away. I know we've got 1 minute left. One thing I would recommend for one or two of your jobs, be in person. I love my remote jobs. I would not give them up for anything. But if you're starting your career, you want to be around people. You want to be able to talk to the person next to you and go, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Can you come help me real quick? Like we can totally do that over this, but like it just doesn't work the same way. And so having that in person may not be your favorite, and I totally get that. But it does kind of help accelerate your career, being able to chat to your more experienced coworker next to you.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep. Exactly. Soft skills are very important. There's a book. I don't have it. David, I will give you one of my favorite books. It's I think I gave it to Ember. It's a software engineering book, but it's all about the other skills, not the coding, right? Like all the other stuff. And so, yeah, I think it's a really good one as well there, because soft skills probably are actually more important remote work than in person, because you can just show up and be butts in seats for in person work. So.
And on a side note on that, if you also want to send a link to the book, I can also post that with the recording of this. So if people are interested in getting it or checking it out at their library or whatever, they can do that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to remember the term for it.
Whenever you can. No
Yeah.
worries now. Yeah. Plus, we are actually up on time. Unfortunately, we are at 7. So we may have to wrap it up. I really hate to be the party killer, but
No.
yeah. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Joe. We really all appreciate you coming here and talking to us about this. It's been a great talk. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. So